To celebrate the return of football, Tifo is offering 30-day free trials to The Athletic, the home of the world's best football writing. From the 1960s until the 1990s, for the best part of 4 decades, the most important room at Anfield was a small, dingy broom cupboard under the main stand. It wasn't a room filled with innovative new technology or anything that suggested it really mattered at all. It was simply a place where 6 of Liverpool's greatest minds came together to talk. They were Joe Fagan, Bob Paisley, Ronnie Moran, Roy Evans, Tom Saunders, and Ruben Bennett. Together, their discussions in what became known as the Boot Room propelled the club towards success in the 70s and 80s. Fagan, writing in his diary, described the decor of the room. In time, it would become furnished with luxuries like a rickety old table and a couple of plastic chairs, a tatty piece of carpet on the floor, and a calendar on the wall that would later be adorned with photographs ripped from newspapers of topless models. There was little evidence to suggest this room was even part of a football club. But it was a key part of a football club that would soon become one of the most successful in Europe. When Shankly was appointed as Liverpool's manager in 1959, there were concerns amongst the backroom staff that he would bring his own team with him. Instead, he chose to stick with the incumbent coaches. "Some managers bring their own people with them," Shankly told them. "Not me. I have my own system and it will work in cooperation with you." Now, the origins of the boot room can be traced back to Fagan, who'd taken to storing crates of Guinness where the players' boots were kept. The stout was provided by the chairman of Guinness Exports, whose Runcorn Works team had been using Liverpool's facilities. Naturally, staff gravitated towards the alcohol, and before long, the boot room was where coaches convened to plan for the future, to discuss tactics and strategies. That they were occasionally mildly inebriated didn't detract from the important work that took place in this crammed, unglamorous space. The boot room was never really about a place. It was never about bricks and mortar, wrote Peter Hooton in his book, The Boot Room Boys. It was about an alliance of people who had a common goal, common values, and the people who created the philosophy of Liverpool Football Club, the people who created the Liverpool Way. Now, the room kept its name because it was, despite its other uses, the place where the boots were stored. There was a small double-doored cupboard at one end which invariably contained a bottle of whiskey. The hard liquor was saved for Saturdays, specifically for post-match conversations. Opposition managers were often lured into the boot room, unaware that Liverpool's shrewd coaches were about to extract key tactical information. They sat on overturned laundry baskets and talked for hours, absorbing detail and discarding anything that wasn't of use. "You're always interested in what people think about your own players," said Paisley, quoted in Ian Herbert's book, Quiet Genius. "They tell you more about your own players than you really know yourself, or vice versa." Now, Liverpool's coaches were careful not to dispense too much information, ensuring that everything that took place in the boot room served to take the club forward. What went on was kept within those 4 walls, Paisley said. Fagan, who like Paisley would later become Liverpool manager, began to keep his diaries and accounts of training in the boot room. It became a place for him and his colleagues to discuss and to develop new approaches. Economist Stefan Szymanski and business consultant Tim Coupez wrote in their book Winners and Losers, The Business Strategy of Football, that Liverpool's later success under Shankly, Paisley and Fagan was a consequence of the structure and organisation put in place during the 60s. And at the heart of that was the boot room. Shankly rarely attended meetings in the boot room, instead drawing on the expertise of his coaches. He guided Liverpool to 3 First Division titles and a UEFA Cup victory before his departure in 1974. But those who'd been working in the background, in the dimly lit room next to Shankly's office, knew there was a need to evolve. And that's what happened under Paisley, who replaced Shankly and won 3 European Cups, as well as a further 6 First Division titles during his 9 years in the job. Fagan added another European Cup during his 2 years as manager, and by the time the boot room era had ended, Liverpool had won 29 major trophies. Kenny Dalglish, who succeeded Fagan in 1985, was accused of phasing out the boot room, but he disputed that. "It's utter rubbish that I dismantled the great boot room," he wrote in his autobiography. "It's an institution, one I would never have meddled with." By 1998, though, it was truly over. Ronnie Moran had left, and so too had Roy Evans. Liverpool headed into the 21st century towards a new era. At the height of its influence, the Boot Room had once hosted Elton John during his time as Watford chairman. The legendary singer asked if he might have a glass of pink gin, but the only alcohol in sight was Guinness and whiskey. John later admitted that the Boot Room made him nervous. There was an aura, a mystique about the place. And the room that proved such a key part of Liverpool's success for decades doesn't exist now. When Graham Souness became manager in 1991, he gave the go-ahead to extend the media interview room behind it. The dark, poky cubbyhole off the dressing room corridor was no more. But 20 years later, its legacy lives on at Anfield. Essential reading for Liverpool supporters. The story of how Jurgen Klopp walked into Anfield and turned Liverpool into title winners. James Pearce and Simon Hughes of The Athletic bring you the complete account. And to check it out, you can get a 30-day free trial. Get access to James and Simon's writing, insight, behind-the-scenes information, and even their fantastic podcast, The Red Agenda. That plus every other Premier League club and even 10 other sports, all covered with the same attention to detail. So visit theathletic.com/Tifo Football to sign up. And thanks for watching today's video.